While much of our attention has been on the dramatic testimony from the January 6th committee hearings in the House, the Senate quietly voted 64-34 to move a new bipartisan gun safety bill forward. That means 14 Republicans voted for it. Democrats hope to pass the bill out of the Senate by the end of the week. And the bill is not nothing either. It's not some trivial symbolic thing. It is the first major national gun legislation in 30 years. And among other things, it is going to close the so-called boyfriend loophole, add enhanced background checks for anyone 18 to 21 years old, allocate a lot of money to help states with red flag laws, and spend billions of dollars improving mental health care across the country. The bill came together just weeks after the murder of 19 children and their 2 teachers in Uvalde, Texas. And for all the concerns in the aftermath of that horrific mass shooting, this time would be like every other time. We would all be very upset, grieving, and nothing would be done. So far, that's not how it turned out. Democratic Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut led this bipartisan effort, and he joins me now. It looks like, I guess, first off, you got the votes, right? This is going to pass. Is that your strong belief?
That is my strong belief, right? I shouldn't count my chickens until they've hatched, but we had 14 Republican votes last night. We will have final passage either tomorrow evening or on Friday. We actually, I think, have a chance to grow that number and have 15, 16 Republicans supporting this in the end. Something that was frankly unthinkable 30 days ago, absolutely unthinkable 10 years ago when we only got 3 or 4 Republican votes for the first attempt at passing anti-gun violence legislation after Sandy Hook. And it's a signal of how far this debate has come, how the political power on the issue of guns has shifted in a decade, a credit to literally millions of activists and advocates all across the country. And I think we're going to get this done and get it over to the House and sign the most important anti-gun violence bill in 30 years. That's a big deal.
The NRA is going to whip against the vote. They announced that after it came out. That's not a surprise. Does it matter, I guess?
I don't think it matters. And that's shocking, right? Because, again, for 30 years in Washington, the NRA got everything they wanted. And if the NRA opposed a bill, it was essentially dead letter. That's not the case any longer. And that is because over time, citizens have organized. And especially in the wake of Uvalde, when senators went home, they heard loud and clear from their constituents that this time doing nothing could not be an option. The fear and the anxiety was just palpable in this country. So, yes, the NRA is opposed to this bill, and there are going to be somewhere between 15 and 20 Republican senators that are going to vote for it, which I think sort of paves the way for even more progress in the future now that we have broken this logjam. That's maybe the legacy of the bill in the long run.
Yeah, that was actually going to be my follow-up. The way political power works, I think the sort of specter of it sometimes can be as important as the effectuation of it. The Donald Trump effect, right? He's going to tweet about me, or, he might endorse my primary. It turns out when you actually take on Donald Trump in a Republican primary, you got a shot. And I think to the extent that that happens, it diminishes his power. And I wonder if there's a similar dynamic with the NRA, right? That if you cross them on a vote and you're still around, maybe that changes the calculation.
Well, and what if for Republicans who vote for this, they see political gain, not just the lack of a sky falling? I think that's what's going to happen. I think Republicans are going to see that there are a lot of folks who sign up for their cause in the wake of this who might have stayed on the sidelines. But now that they see a Republican willing to act on gun violence, that's going to accrue to their political benefit. But just for a second, Chris, I don't want to view this all through the prism of sort of the political shift and what comes next, because this bill in and of itself saves a whole bunch of lives between red flags and taking guns away from domestic abusers and new tools to stop gun trafficking. This bill is going to save thousands of lives all across this country. And I want us to, also celebrate that.
Totally. So I want to talk about the federal criminal offenses for gun trafficking and how they work. What is in there, and what does it mean?
So, one of the biggest problems in this country is the flow of illegal guns from states with loose background check laws, where criminals can easily buy guns, into states like Connecticut that have stricter background checks. There is no federal criminal prohibition on gun trafficking. There is no federal criminal prohibition on straw purchasing. That's when somebody goes in and buys guns for someone that is prohibited from buying guns. That's how a lot of these guns get into illegal traffic. So for the first time, we now have federal crimes that prosecutors can use and threaten to use to unwind these trafficking rings. And I've heard a couple experts in the field suggest that that provision may actually be in the long run the most important, because to cut down on the flow of illegal guns into places like Connecticut, cities like New York or Chicago, might pay off in bigger ways than some of the other provisions of this bill around red flags or background checks on under 21-year-olds.
Well, that's why I wanted to zoom in on that, because the supply issue seems so pressing here, right? There are so many guns in the country. There have been so many sold just in the last 3 years. This seems, you've got individual actors, right? Someone who has some kind of distress that might be stopped by a background check. But in the broadest sense, that part of the bill seems like the most to address the aggregate supply of just how available guns are for people to use for bad purposes.
Listen, what we know is that in communities that have more guns, there's more gun violence. It's a one-for-one. As you have 1% more guns available in a community, you have 1% more homicidal violence. And what we also know is that without the federal government being involved in going after gun trafficking, states are really helpless, because the trafficking occurs across state boundaries. But the gun lobby had been incredibly effective for 30 years in stopping the passage of a federal prohibition on trafficking, because they knew that ultimately that was going to make it a lot harder for this illegal flow of guns that makes a lot of money for these guys. So this is a big deal.
Senator Chris Murphy, Connecticut, thank you very much for joining us tonight.